Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. Thank you again for tuning in to another awesome story. Today, we have the pleasure to interview Sally Sargent, the COO of the 23rd World Petroleum Congress that is actually happening here in Houston, December 5th to the 9th this year, 2021. Believe it or not, it's returning to the US for the very first time in over 30 years and bringing in amazing guest speakers. It's going to be a great place to network with like-minded individuals. We're all for oil and gas and want to share it with the world. You do not want to miss it. If you want to find out more information, look at the guest speakers, all the events that are going to be happening, please make sure you visit their website at www.23wpchouston.com. And that is also the link where you can go register. So thank you, Sally, for being on today. I can't wait to find out more about your story.
Thank you. Happy to be
here. And
Sally,
I mean, we've literally been waiting for this moment. I feel like our audience is going to get such a good representation of what it's like to be moving industries as well. So you started in sports, then you moved on to oil and gas to be, over this event. So everybody's kind of wondering, what was it like being you growing up? How did this all evolve? So why don't we start there and start learning about, who was Sally when she was a young girl?
Well, thank you both for having me, and I'm delighted to be here. Well, I grew up in Arizona. I'm a second generation Arizona family, and my father, his career was in the international mining business. So he was lead sales for heavy mining machinery all over the globe. So we always seemed to have someone from another country at our home having dinner, whether it was from Russia, China, Japan, Europe. And so I got a flavor for the international side of things early on because of that. And also, I think because with my dad being in sales, we also learned early on that it's, really about relationships and how you kind of connect the dots with other people and the importance of that. And so I think somehow I just kind of gravitated toward those kinds of partnership or relationships. And to your point, I did start in college football, college sports in Arizona with the Fiesta Bowl, the college bowl game. The Fiesta Bowl was the first college bowl game way back in the day to have a title sponsor. And so I was hired to be the liaison between what was then the Sunkist Fiesta Bowl. So the Sunkist growers of oranges, and the Fiesta Bowl. And that's really how I kind of cut my teeth on learning about sports marketing, sponsorship, and putting those relationships together in the sports world.
Was there ever a push from your dad maybe going into kind of the same industry that he was in because he liked it so much and wanted you to maybe continue? Or also, was there a big push on sports? Did you play lots of sports growing up? Was your parents there watching you every time and like maybe wanting you to be going to the Olympics or doing something with sports for the rest of your life?
So I'll really date myself, but when I grew up, we didn't have much in the way of women's sports. I was an athlete, though. I was a dancer for the first part of my life, and still love performing the visual and performing arts today. But I don't know that it was really about Dad wanting us to kind of move into that area. My brother became an engineer, just like my dad. But I was more focused on liberal arts, communications, all of those kinds of things. So I think, understanding, again, back to building a strong skill set, people skills, was really part of it. So I wouldn't say that sports was part of my life or all of that, but again, with this big Fiesta Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl was and still is today one of the largest volunteer organizations in college sports with over, I think it's 3,500 full-time volunteers in the organization. And so it really was more about that. It was more about the community side. And it just so happened that there was a football game attached to it because we also produced about 50 events in the course of a year round. for the Fiesta Bowl. So there was a lot of other activity and a lot of other community engagement. And I think that's really where I kind of got that desire to be more almost in the hospitality industry when you think about it, and then working with various companies and brands to be able to help, engage with them to promote and advertise, their brand that way.
What's really interesting is that you were actually in the sports industry for over a decade, doing everything from what you're talking about in the very beginning stages in college to going to the Super Bowl and producing that as well. But, what's very interesting is the sports world is very male dominated, kind of similar to the oil and gas space. Did you ever feel like when you first started, like you were kind of an outlier to be the one to be promoting these events? Was it difficult to get that spot? Because even like you were saying that women's sports wasn't really a thing when you were growing up. Did it seem kind of odd when they were like, oh, why does Sally want to be like doing, be involved in NFL?
What does she know, right?
Yeah.
I will tell you, we all have our stories to share. But I've never felt that I was less than in that male dominated industry. I always felt very respected. But the other thing I will tell you is I had really great mentors over the years. And honestly, because of the industries I've been in, they were all male. And again, my generation, right? So an awful lot of male influence. But I think that really gave me a leg up because it allowed me to have strong people around me who pushed me, who were not afraid to tell me where I needed to, bone up on certain areas of business or understanding. But that also were able to then kind of allow me to use my strengths and build. Again, I just go back to the people business and then the communication side, really learning how to communicate what it is you want. And I think if you can find the right way to either in the written or spoken word, communicate your message, people will listen and people will pay attention.
So, everybody knows what the Super Bowl is. It's, I heard it was like the most expensive commercial per second if you wanted to be part of it. Tell us a little bit about what goes into planning, months, teams, millions of dollars. Like it's one day event. And if it goes wrong, I think you guys your heads are on the chopping block.
Well, that's true. I've been involved with 6 Super Bowls, but of course, my most favorite and best experience was in Houston, running the organizing committee for the Houston Super Bowl committee. And I say that for a number of reasons, but I think the most important one is that because I have worked in a lot of different markets across the US with the NFL, there's a big difference between the various markets and how these communities either come together or maybe don't to support the efforts of bringing an event like the Super Bowl to their city. And Houston by far is just one of those amazing cities where the community really gathers together. And yes, on the volunteer side of the equation, but then also the business leaders of the community. You cannot do an event as you just described like this, like the magnitude, the size of a Super Bowl, without being able to raise an awful lot of money. And so to your point, the expectation is very high and the deliverable is very high. And so you have to be able to put that, elevated bar of your standards up and accept nothing less than that. And so you find a way to get that done. When you talk about that single day, the game itself is what it's all about, to your point about, the advertising, the cost of a 30-second commercial during the game, all of those things, you bet that's the culmination. But for example, here in Houston, we had a 10-day fan festival that happened leading up to the event itself on game day. And so, we hosted 1.3 million people in and around the downtown area in Discovery Green and all of that for our big Super Bowl live event. And so it also gives the community an opportunity to participate in the event, even if you don't have a ticket to the game.
I love that. And I love that about sports and it's all entirely like, even if you can't, or you don't have a seat at the game, there's so much that you can do outside, even outside the gates. And it's just so exciting, which I think that's really awesome that you're able to bring that to Houston. And, was there ever a difficulty, because you weren't a natural Houstonian, when you came into Houston? Was it hard to develop those relationships to get those kind of sponsors, because that's a lot of money? What kind of advice would you give to somebody that's kind of trying to do that same thing, and they're maybe not familiar with the location, but they know what their end goal is, but they just have to understand, how they get to that goal?
So I was really, again, very fortunate with Houston and also in other markets too, but Houston is, again, exceptional. But really connecting the dots with the right people. The greater, Houston Convention and Visitors Bureau at the time, and now kind of the Houston First Corporation, that is the destination marketing organization for the city, is really the first point of contact. And from there, just connecting the dots with so many of the business leaders in the community. But it requires a lot of work. You have to learn how to assimilate very quickly. You have to do a lot of reading, understanding who's who, right? And, who's making what happen, and staying on top of things. So I was, again, very fortunate to have a lot of doors opened for me. But then certainly being able to make sure that, you have to take this work very seriously, as you do any work, but you have to do your extra effort and do your homework so that you can have a part in the conversation, not just listening, but actually engaging with others.
So tell us how you went from the sports industry, advertising, in your face TV, to the oil and gas industry, which is, in my opinion, just a complete opposite. We don't want anyone to know who we are. We like to hide. I don't want to be in the media. It's just, I think the only thing that's resemblance is the, male dominated side of it. But how did that even come to fruition? And also maybe when you were offered that, looking like the majority of people say oil and gas, like, I don't think I want to go in that dark space. How was that even brought up to you? And how did you handle even leaving the sports industry, which sounds really fun, to the oil and gas industry?
So I mentioned the Houston First being the destination marketing organization. So think of it this way: instead of thinking of these events in one industry or another, these events are citywide events, as we call them, and they are very plum, kind of, you really like a feather in your cap for a city to be able to host a Super Bowl or a World Petroleum Congress. And so these are bids that go out, and the city seeks out these events for notoriety, for economic impact, for a lot of the reasons that we were just describing about the Super Bowl. So Houston First approached me about wanting to get involved in this event, the World Petroleum Congress. And of course, to your point, I had no knowledge of, other than being a consumer of the oil and gas industry, to really understand what that was all about. I had a little inkling of it because, as I mentioned about Dad being in the mining industry, they are very, almost hand in hand, very similar in nature, natural resources, of course. But I think what intrigued me about this project was the international component associated with it. And because we had so many of our sponsors of Super Bowl, because being here in Houston, so many of our large companies are in the oil and gas sector, I had relationships with several of those companies that then, of course, became sponsors of the World Petroleum Congress. And so I was intrigued, and I was very intrigued to learn more about the oil and gas industry. But I'll tell you what surprised me more than anything is how much I didn't know. Being a consumer of energy, like the whole world is, it's real easy for us to say oil and gas is dark or the bad guy, and we need to be doing something else. And it's not until we have better education around what the energy industry is all about and how our big oil and gas companies are really the leaders and drivers in creating this energy transition and the future of energy for cleaner output, for climate, management, just all of those things. And so I'm now feel like after, 3.5 years of really sinking my teeth into this industry, I'm a big champion for it, because I think that we are sorely lacking in our country with educating our constituents about the real story of the industry. And Massiel, you brought up a very good point. The industry always wants to stay below the radar, wants to stay out of the limelight, stay out of media. And I think that we have a great opportunity with the World Petroleum Congress to help the industry tell their story. And that's what we're planning to do in just a few short weeks.
I'm so happy that you said that, Sally. Like, that is like the whole reason why we even have this podcast, is to show the world that there's not only great people that work in the industry, but what the industry does. So you are an expert in this field of advertising, marketing, building a community, relationships. What do you think we could benefit the most from? How do you, we're obviously doing something wrong by staying in the back and not wanting to promote the industry. What is the best way for us to move forward, do you think, for these companies to get a better line of sight on, and for people that aren't in the industry to understand all that we do?
It's a tough balance, because I am sure that our industry now did not always think that way, right? But I think when you get hit over the head too many times, or you are perceived by the media as simply handing out propaganda, that you decide, it's probably just best if we just go about our business and, not really tell these stories. But I will tell you, the Congress coming up, we really have the opportunity to now, we've cultivated and curated the stories of a lot of these companies in the industry that are doing all of this great work around the globe. I think that, again, we as the United States take it for granted that we can turn on our light switch, that we can turn on our gas on our stove, that we can heat and cool our homes. And there are many countries around the globe whereby they have no affordable energy, no reliable energy. And so I think this concept of the industry being, reticent to not be a cleaner industry today is a little short-sighted on our part. And I think that the more stories we can tell about what our industry is doing around the globe and really being able to get this message out, I think in many ways, it probably starts with education in the schools, first and foremost, because I think our young people hear either one side or the other, pro and con on energy, and it's just not that clear cut. And I think we need to do a better job with education in our school systems. And then how can we, as the industry itself, try to tell more stories that affect more of the world at large?
I love the way you put it. So tell us a little bit more about the World Petroleum Congress. What is it exactly? How did it start? I believe every 3 years you guys move to a different country. Why haven't you been here in 30 years when this is like the energy capital of the US, which I would think is a pretty important country? And why do a lot of people call it the Olympics of, the industry?
Yeah. So the World Petroleum Congress is governed by the World Petroleum Council. The council is made up of 65 member countries. The majority are the largest, producers or consumers of energy around the globe. And they have their Congress every 3 years. And to your point, we've not been in the US since 1987. The member countries vote on the next country where the event will take place. And I think honestly, probably in many cases, much like a Super Bowl or a national political convention, whatever it is, many times there's almost a laundry list or a pecking order of other cities or countries that may have bid on this, that wanted it, that didn't get selected. So then maybe they're kind of the next in line. And, so I think that's how it kind of plays out. But I will tell you that the US spent the better part of 10 years trying to get this event to come back. And it's because it only happens once a year. So the council only votes once every 3 years to be able to then identify the next host country. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I don't think it was certainly because people didn't want to come to the US or to Houston. But I think also it's also a matter of maybe going other places that they don't typically travel to, because we are the energy capital of the world. A lot of people come here and do business all the time. So perhaps some of that intrigue of going to another, country or city may have played into that as well. But you asked about the Olympics of the oil and gas industry. And, it's amazing to me, even with our COVID pandemic and just barely coming out of that, the fact that we have just lifted the US travel ban as of Monday to now allow international travelers to come to the US. Just all of the elements that you would think we probably don't have very many people from outside the US coming to this event. We have representatives from over 60 countries that have already registered, signed up, have their visas, have their plane tickets, they're coming.
Wow.
And we also have 18 energy ministers from around the globe who will be with us. So when you talk about that level and caliber of people that are coming to this event, that's why it's the Olympics of the oil and gas industry. You have every CEO from every major country and company coming. And again, our job is to create the forum to allow these wonderful and very, very important conversations to happen, and certainly happen in person. We postponed this event by 12 months. And I think, during that time of postponement, we thought, should we go virtual? Should we go hybrid? How are we going to do this? And we put a flag in the sand a few months ago and said, we're going in person, because you cannot replace the face-to-face conversations you have with people. And especially when you're dealing with a variety of countries and cultures from around the globe, the importance of being face-to-face with people makes all the difference. So that's really what you're looking at. I mean, we've got a star-studded lineup coming to this.
I know. Jamie and I looked at the website. We're like, who are the guest speakers? And we're like, this CEO, this CEO, this CEO. We were like, how did they even get all these people
in one room?
It's amazing. Usually, I feel like the events that we have seen, you have like one or two really great speakers, and you're like, wow, that was awesome. But the lineup was just like incredible.
Phenomenal.
I mean, yeah.
Is there a vision for this event? Like, I know there's always some theme usually with conferences or events. And so what's the theme, the vision for this year's event?
So our theme is innovative energy solutions, pretty broad, but I think intentionally kind of designed that way because you select that theme so far in advance. But I think honestly, if you ask anybody now, just even in the last 12 months, we all can appreciate where the conversation is going and what you're going to hear from these execs from around the globe, which is really very paramount to being on the heels of COP26, the energy, the whole energy transition, future of energy. How are we going to come together for the future of our world? Climate will be obviously a very front and center topic. So I think that the theme itself, what I think is exciting is when you think about innovation and you think about technology and you think about the explosion and then the, collaboration between the tech world and the energy industry. I mean, my goodness, we have the AI company, C3 AI, Tom Siebel will be with us. We have this huge burgeoning community now of startups in the tech industry right here in Houston. We have an innovation zone where they're going to be pitching their ideas to companies. I mean, there's there's an awful lot of connectivity now that I think is going to be exciting. And of course, on top of that, the financial world and the investments that are needed in the energy industry right now to be able to get us to that next level of clean energy and, continuity, I think that's what's exciting about it. And that's what makes it so great for Houston, because we get to put Houston front and center, not just as the energy capital, but as the city that is hosting this fabulous international event.
That's awesome. Well, we talked a little bit about the Petroleum show that's coming up, but I want to get back to you a little bit. Tell us, obviously, the last even 10 years of the roles that you've had are hands-on, require a lot of work, probably a lot of travel and many hours. How do you handle your work-life balance, whether it's with your relationships or kids, if you have any? How do you handle that? Because we love to ask all of our C-level executives or VPs that have been on the podcast, because it's something that we look, how do they do it so that we can know that we can also do it? So can you share a little bit maybe of some sacrifices that you've had to take, or how do you balance it?
Sure. So I'm Aunt Sally to 15 nieces and nephews. And so I'm fortunate because I'm very involved in their lives, but I didn't raise the children on my own. And I have a fabulous, as you can tell, big family that are very supportive of me and of my career. I'm probably not the best example for a work-life balance, and mainly because I love what I do. And
everybody's balance looks different, that's what I like to say.
Well, and I truly enjoy the people that I work with or that I get to meet and then get to build relationships with as a result of my work. So that's very special. I think, though, you do have to take time, especially, like, I'll give you the example right now. For the last couple of months, we're working around the clock. And even if you have to be working on your weekends and all of that, it's very important to take a step back and take some time. I typically really almost always try not to work on Saturday, and to be able to do some things that I like to do. I love yoga. I love being outdoors, and just enjoying either people's company or nature. I think that's very, very important. And I think you have to find ways to keep yourself centered, whether that's eating healthy, taking care of yourself, minding that. And when in the positions I've been in, overseeing, organizations, it's important to impart that message to your team members. And I think the best way to do that is by setting an example. So trying to do things that help others, encourage them to take care of themselves too. It's that old adage on the airplane, put your own oxygen mask on first before you can help others, that I think is very important to remember.
I love that, especially because it's very easy to burn out when, you're a workaholic, and Jamie and I are both like that. But I like setting the example for your team, because sometimes you're working for managers that are, work 24/7. And I love to work for a manager that I see like constantly working, because it motivates me. But at the same time, you're like, well, he doesn't take, Saturdays off, so neither should I, so at the same time, sure, we're workaholics, but the people on our team may be looking up to us and feeling like that's the only way that they will be accepted, or we're setting the norm as well, So I think I agree, like, we need to catch ourselves and set that example or culture, to your team.
It's important.
And Sally, lastly, for our last question here, I really wanted to go back to what you're talking about with relationship building. You're obviously an expert in this. I mean, you've been able to change industries and still cultivate those relationships and honestly do something that's very difficult for a lot of people, which is put on such a large event like the Super Bowl or, the Congress event that's coming up. So what advice would you give to our listeners on like how you were able to transition and then also keep those relationships, build relationship? Like what do you think attributes you have that make it so easy for you to do this?
Well, first off, it's not easy. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
You
can make it look easy.
You have to like it. You have to like what you're doing, and you have to believe in what you're doing. Your question earlier about, why was I interested in kind of going over to the oil and gas industry and, that sort of thing. I think it's fascinating to learn about people and learn about new cultures and learn about new industries. I'm fascinated by life, I guess I would say. So I am constantly trying to learn more about, people and what they're doing that makes the world go around. But I think you have to be able to, like I said, there's no substitute for hard work. There's just not. But you also have to genuinely care about the people that you either are engaging with or working with. And our motto always is, it has to be a win-win. You can't go into a negotiation thinking, I'm going to try to get this, whatever it is, for the least amount of money, or, be the guy who won and the other guy didn't. It has to always be a mutual win for both sides. Otherwise, you're doomed from the start. Mm-hmm. So the other thing I will tell you is that in everyone's world, you're only as good as your last event, your last engagement with someone. People remember that. And fortunately, because we had such a huge success with Super Bowl, because of the Houston community, it was a huge group. We had an awful lot of our companies that are on board with us now say, I'm in, because we had a proven track record. They knew we could deliver. And, I think being upfront, being honest with people, and delivering bad news immediately, sometimes you're not going to be able to satisfy them. But if you're honest with people, and perhaps sometimes you ask them to help you solve a problem, you can get to the end result. But again, I just think that, I enjoy people, no matter who it is. And it makes life interesting. And I think that's the fun and the beauty of it.
Well, Sally, we can see the passion through the screen of we can't wait to actually meet you in person. And thank you so much for sharing your story, for telling us about this great, amazing event. I mean, listen, guys, if you're listening to it now before December, you're probably on Google right now, typing it in and get your passes, because it's an event that who knows when it's going to be back, right? Another 30 years or who knows. So
it really is a once in a lifetime experience. And, we've got a way for anyone to participate, whether you want to just walk the exhibition floor, whether you want to come to a single day, whether you want to come to the whole Congress. It's again, 23wpchouston.com. And I just think that no matter what your area of interest is, whether you're in the industry or not, you're going to get an awful lot out of it. And again, that face-to-face big event like this for Houston is something you don't want to miss.
You also never know whose hand you're going to shake that might be able to change your life. A lot of people we've had on here was they met at a conference or they met at this random place and said, hey, come work for me. So you don't know what's going to happen if you could go. Well, thank you so much, Sally. We really appreciate it. And
thank you both. You do such a terrific job. I love your podcast.
Thank you, Sally. That means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. And we just wanted to say a quick thank you to our sponsor of the podcast, Technique FMC. And see you guys on the next episode, everyone. Bye.